Greetings and welcome to the Semicolon Podcast. My name is Ralph Kintab and it is a great pleasure to have you joining me here on episode number 2 of the Semicolon Podcast, where we seek to answer one main question. And that question is, does the story continue or does it end? The whole intention of this podcast is to seek to provide you with necessary information, relevant information, knowledge, and in some cases advice, as it relates to the world around you, provide you with, the knowledge that you need to make sound decisions, because there are so many things that are happening in our island and in the world itself, that impact our lives and the lives of our loved ones. And in addition to that, it's also to leave you with some encouragement to face the day, to face tomorrow, because I can very well imagine that sometimes we all need a break from everything that's happening outside of us. But guess what? Life continues, and hence why the semicolon was created, because instead of saying that the story has ended and just placing a period or a full stop, the whole intention of the semicolon is to say that the story could have ended, but here's a little more, and I want to give you a little more than what is seen on the surface, right? We want to dig a little deeper, ask a couple more questions, because the story never ends. And that's the reality of life. Life continues. And so will we. So for today, we're going to be looking into providing an analysis, some perspective on the question of who owns St. Martin. Yes, this wonderful island that many of us call home. We call it the Friendly Island, Sunshine City. Whether you live on the northern side or the southern side of the island, French or Dutch, the question is though, who owns St. Martin? And why is it important that you know who owns St. Martin? So let's get into it. So with this question, it may seem controversial, and perhaps, you're wondering, will I come out, will I, start reading a list of names of people who own critical real estate on this island? Perhaps, maybe so. But I want to provide you with a breakdown, to understand the fact that whoever owns the land or whoever owns the table, let's say for example, controls the game. Therefore, it matters who owns this island. If you are at all concerned about the future of St. Martin, about your future, the future of your children, of your community, then you need to know. And again, it matters to have the awareness about who owns this territory, this land that we call home. And it is significant mainly because land, besides being a resource for wealth, besides being a resource for creating your livelihood, so extraction of minerals, resources, being able to provide you with shelter, water, etc., you name it, land has a significant value in the fact that land tells a story, and land, real estate, allows you to manifest that which is within you or within a people group or cultures, right? Or ethnicities even. So a good example as we look at that is for let's look at the time frame, the time frame, 6 p.m. 6 p.m. on St. Martin, 6 p.m. in Jamaica, 6 p.m. in any country in Asia, 6 p.m. in Canada, in Mexico, in Antarctica, 6 p.m. anywhere in the world. It's different than the 6 p.m. that we experience here in St. Martin. Now, we're all humans and we tend to do the same things, but our behaviors, our traditions are different based on the geographical location that we are in. So while, for example, 6 p.m. in all those places that are listed, persons may go out for a happy hour, at the end of the day, because of their culture, their climate, their beliefs, their traditions, based on the territory that they live in, that connection, 6 p.m. is different all around. And it's the same where, even right here on St. Martin. So we're looking at just St. Martin as an island. And we're looking at individual homes. 6 a.m. now in my home, 6 a.m. in your home, 6 a.m. in your neighbor's home is pretty much quite different. Some of us may wake up and make some bush tea and Johnny cakes. And you know where to go to get your good Johnny cakes. St. Martin Sweet. The same. But besides that, some of you may perhaps start the day off with meditation, or right off go for breakfast, or maybe might skip breakfast. But it's different because every house has its own culture. Every house has its own beliefs, its own traditions, and that is created over time. And so every individual house has its own story. Just as every nation, every country has its own story based on the people who gather there, right? And develop the story. The people who gather there and add color to the story, who add settings and scenes and plots and you name it to that territory or the land which they live. And so again, if we are at all concerned about the future of St. Martin, then I'm telling you, it matters to know who owns St. Martin, who owns the land, who has real estate. And to now go deeper into it, we're going to take a look into the history, because in able to really understand the present, we have to have a firm foundation, a firm understanding of the past, because the past influences the present, and that too can change the future. So we're going to go back into the past, journey into the past, look at some stuff which will help give context of our present, but then also sends off signal about where we are going as a country. But just before we go ahead onto that fun and exciting journey, I do want to share with you an amazing opportunity that you need to take advantage of. And guess what that is? It is simply to go and check out the Gingerbread Cafe located at the Bel Air Beach Hotel. So as a journalist and one who tends to often have to meet with people, it is, one of the hidden gems on this island, I would honestly say. Because the Gingerbread Cafe, one, it has really nice and appealing prices. But besides that, delicious food and great customer service that you can't beat. But also, one that gives you a fantastic ambiance, that is open space, amazing view of the ocean, while you can sit and enjoy great food and great company. So be sure to check out the Gingerbread Cafe, and even check out their Monday night special, where they have all you can eat barbecue. Now, if you're like me, that's a deal you just can't beat. Take advantage of ability to find a nice, sweet location that you can share, whether on a date or even an official or formal meeting, with sounds of the ocean and sights of the sea that you just can't beat. So they're also available for bookings and parties. But guess what? You're listening to me talk about it, but how about you go there and check it out for yourself? You're bound to have a great experience. Trust me. Alright folks, I trust that you will go ahead and take advantage of that sweet offer that I just shared with you at the Bel Air Beach Hotel. And to now get back to the topic at hand, land, real estate, seeking to answer the question, who owns St. Martin? Let's now journey to the past. So what we have is a situation where the St. Martin we see today, that we are aware of, we know came from a colonial battle between several colonial powers, who then agreed that they will share, French and Dutch, they will share this landmass that we call St. Martin, and peacefully exploit its resources. And so we now have this sales pitch which we use to market the island, to say that it's the only island in the Caribbean that has French and Dutch with no border, etc., etc. But guess what? That came from a very bloody past, because the land has its story. So first of all, the island had its indigenous settlers who, resided here, which gave it the name Swaliga, which means land of salt, as well as the other name of the island, indigenous name, Walichi, meaning land of brave women. They, of course, were driven out by the Spanish, who were among the first to travel into the New World, with Christopher Columbus, who so-called discovered the New World. But he didn't discover anything because there were already people here. So he encountered persons, he encountered land. But anyhow, so St. Martin was discovered by the Spanish, and they, originally settled on the island, but they had no real interest in St. Martin, because the island didn't really have, as much resources as they would like to exploit, and mainly being gold. Really, they were after the gold. All right, so we had the Dutch who then came, and the Dutch were very interested in St. Martin because of our salt ponds. The island was rich in salt, and the salt was something that was necessary to help boost their herring industry. But then you also had the French who came and settled here, and a battle ensued. And so, for many years, the island at one point was entirely French. The island at one point was entirely Dutch. The island at one point was also entirely English. And the French and the Dutch, they fought each other until later on they decided, you know what? We already have a treaty. Let's actually respect it and live at peace. Let's, just share the island. You stay on your side. I stay on my side. If you need my help, I got you. If I need your help, I'm sure you got me. And so what we have is a situation where the island was colonized and enslaved persons were brought here. And then, we often say the word slaves, but our ancestors were not slaves. They were enslaved. They were human beings that were taken and placed into slavery. And so part of the island's story, the story of this land, included a very cruel and horrific period where Africans were forced to toil the land for the prosperity, the benefit, the livelihood of Europeans and the plantation owners and so forth. But eventually, slavery ended, and with the abolition of slavery, you had where St. Martin now, the entire land, did not just belong to the plantation owners and those free whites, who would work on their plantations. You now have where land was allotted and claimed by those formerly enslaved persons. And so the makeup of the island now solely consisted of St. Martiners. It wasn't really French or Dutch or English. Everyone agreed that we are now all St. Martiners. Therefore, with that being set in stone, even though it wasn't a huge population, as the story of this island began to develop, you had where the leaders of the country, in making decisions that would impact the residents, the landowners specifically, everything they did was for the interest of those who inhabited in the land, especially those who owned land, because they had real estate. They had real, tangible, hard-hitting, actual, lasting estate, position, legacy, wealth, standing, voice. So that's to show you how powerful real estate is. Because at one point, and not just on St. Martin, but in many places around the world, it was only landowners who were able to vote until the universal suffrage came about. Because when ownership of land grants you the extra privilege of shaping the culture, shaping the future or identity of a nation. So St. Martin eventually, did not remain as an island that only had the St. Martin people. You now had some differences. You now had visitors. But then with these visitors came investments into the island by particularly American and to a small extent European individuals. So their investment on the island now meant that the identity of St. Martin began to change, because the culture that was now introduced to the St. Martin, to St. Martin, among the people, it added more flavor, So, and not to say that we didn't have no flavor, but just saying. So, the point I'm making is this: our leaders now, their focus was not just on making decisions in the interest of St. Martin people and St. Martin landowners, because you now had another group or type of landowners who, although they may not be able to vote, they invested in the land. And when you make an investment, you want a return. Whether or not that return is in a form of money, whether or not that return is in a form of favors, or in a form of resources, in a form of opportunities, those investors, be it investors in restaurants, in hotels, in properties, etc., they now have a vested stake in this land. And so the leaders now have to consider not just the original people or only the St. Martiners, but now those who are real estate owners. So we see where the story of St. Martin began to change. St. Martin was not just a traditional rural nation, but the economy started to thrive and to boom. You had the famous Mullet Bay, which was a center for everything, at the center for, let's say, the boom that St. Martin experienced, which then led to the introduction of other cultures, whether people from surrounding islands as well as other nations around the world. And with that, you now have the changing of the St. Martin identity, because besides the way we speak, besides the foods that we eat, besides our traditions, besides the music that we play, what shapes our identity is the landowners. Because you had a time when it was only St. Martin people, but then it's no longer just St. Martin people owning land. So it's the same way where certain islands, they have restrictions on foreigners or foreign investment, and especially when the ownership of land is concerned. It's a reason why, when we look at perhaps St. Kitts or Anguilla, which is really right next door, the Anguillan has more of a voice, has a stronger say, right? The Jamaican, has a stronger say. The Russian, the Canadian, the American, they have a stronger say in what happens in their country or island, in their territory, because they make up the majority of the landowners. But is that the same here on our sweet St. Martin land? Therefore, our story began to change in many ways, where, for example, one of the things that led to such a rapid change in St. Martin's story is the fact that even St. Martin people themselves, people on the island, sold their land. So they gave up part of their identity. They gave up part of their ability to make a decision to steer the course of this island. They gave up the expression of their St. Martinness to whoever else, right? And that is something we have to acknowledge as we start to understand the past and leading it into the present reality that we have right now. Because we now have to go past just being able to say, but I am St. Martin, I'm from here, I born here, my parents from here. That is all fine and dandy. But guess what? It's easy and it's okay as well to say that you're from here. But at the end of the day, where's your deed? Where's your real estate? Where's your stake? Where's your investment? I from here, cool. You're St. Martin. Your roots go back far. You're born here. You're like me. I mean, my heritage is not from here. Both my parents come from Haiti, but I born here. So I'm a St. Martin. But where is our stake? Where is our investment to say that, you know what? It's beyond just the metaphysical and the sentimental, cultural side of our identity. What about now our real estate, our real position, our real standing, our real wealth, and so forth? That matters. That significantly matters. And I'm going to use a few examples to show how, our story has changed so drastically. And it all leads to answering the question, who owns St. Martin? When we look at the Emilio Wilson estate, for example, I remember, as a little boy in Mac school, after school, me and some friends, we would miss our bus, sometimes having to walk home from St. John's to town. Well, at the time I lived in town. But nonetheless, after school, go to the Emilio Wilson estate and pick pomserets. Pick pomserets till we can't eat pomserets. Till all now, as an adult, I can't eat pomserets. I don't really enjoy eating pomserets because I ate too many as a child. I think I ate enough for several lifespans. But nonetheless, that is so when you look at the Emilio Wilson estate, that is my story, my connection along with some of my friends to that land. But that same land also had a story of pain, of sorrow, of agony, of abuse and so forth, because it was once a plantation, and slaves once dwelt and lived there. But then the land turned into the ownership of Emilio Wilson, who it's named after, who was a man who believed in agriculture, he believed in planting, he believed in cultural affairs and supporting locals, and all. One of the key things that he believed in, which there's actually documented proof of, is that at no point did he want the estate, his land, to be used for capitalist or commercialized gain. He wanted it as an estate that would just speak to the pride of St. Martin, the culture, the identity of St. Martin. But guess what? The real estate owner, the landowner changed. Even though our government had a role in it, at the end of the day, who do they answer to, right? Because that land now has foreign investment. And with that investment, you had something, when you look at the Emilio Wilson estate, you now see something that he would have been totally against. Whether we like it or not. Just that commercialized side of the estate. While there's still a park, he would have been against it, especially when you consider all the historical damage that was done to build, on that, to build and commercialize that estate. But it makes a difference who has a stake, who has an interest in the island, because while we as a people may be like, we want to preserve it, we want to, maintain our heritage and our history and so forth. Guess what? Who owns the land? The landowner gets to determine what happens and shift the story. Because the story now, has a capitalist or commercialized version of it, outside of what, Emilio Wilson himself would have liked, but also us as a nation, right? Because then the question is, with just that one exploitation of the estate, who's to say that at some point in time they wouldn't develop the whole thing and the whole value, the identity that place had, totally, it's totally gone. So at the same time, one of the things that land ownership gives you as a privilege is the ability to set boundaries, and those boundaries speak powerfully. Again, those boundaries speak powerfully, because in setting boundaries, you determine what you allow and disallow. One of the ways in which we can see that is just in the case of, for example, the fact that we have so many lottery booths on this island. You will have a whole one street with about 7 and 8 lottery booths. You would have a district with umpteen amount of lottery booths. But then guess what? When you look at the areas that those booths are located, it's never in the more upscale areas on St. Martin. It's never on the mountaintop, right? It's definitely in the valleys, but it's never in the gated spaces. It's always in the places that, have basically become impoverished, or, places that are more prone to social ills and exploitation of vices and so forth, addictions and health issues and so forth, right? Because of urbanization. So those persons who live in those much nicer areas, to be honest, they get to determine what they want to see in their area. They get to shape the culture, the identity of their area, because they are owners. They have real estate. However, in areas that are more impoverished, right, you tend to see, again, all these lottery booths, but also even, and in the case of, for example, Arch Road, in the Arch Road area, the fact that you have basically 1, 2, 4 brothels in just that one area within 2 to 3 minutes of each other, well, what does that say, right? About that, what does that say about the area? What is the story that is being told? That story can be told because of who owns the property. And as a culture and as people, we express our interests based on the land that we own. That is the power that is granted to you when you're a landowner. And so, even when you look at slums, the areas on St. Martin that we call slums, to be frank, one of the things that allow those slums to exist is the fact that you have a slumlord landlord. A slumlord landlord. Someone who just doesn't care whatsoever about people being able to build up shacks next to each other, build very dangerous homes, structures, the unhealthy practices that tends to happen, the poor infrastructure and so forth. They don't care. Now, just as I spoke about accountability in the first episode, those people also have a responsibility to build and to set up structures that that give them dignity, that are healthy, that create homely environments. But the landowners, at the end of the day, whoever owns those slums, they are the one who have the power to allow or disallow such a situation to fester or to be created. As long as I collect my rent money and these people pay, I could kill anything. The houses could burn because somebody forgot to blow out a candle, or there was a shortage in the fact that you have in these areas, some of those people don't have electricity, and so they use extension cords to borrow electricity from someone all the way up the road. You name it, you have these type of stuff happening. But guess what? The landlord, slumlord, the one who sets the boundaries, who sets the rule, who determines the course of that area, they don't care. So and that person doesn't care, then guess what? A culture is created, a tradition is created, beliefs, practices, habits are created. And so it matters who owns the land. And one final point before transitioning to get into the answer. Let's look at Phillipsburg. Phillipsburg is the capital of St. Martin, center for trade, for commerce, politics, because the Parliament building is in Phillipsburg, the government administration built in Phillipsburg, all the banks, the majority of the banks have their headquarters in Phillipsburg. Financial capital, the harbor, the port is very close to Phillipsburg. And it once was basically in Phillipsburg. And so you have where in the past, all the landowners, everyone who owned property, real estate in Phillipsburg was St. Martin people. But guess what happened? That began to change. And how and why? Well, political leaders at the time told the people, guess what? There is land available in the countryside, in areas of Betty's Estate and Saunders and other areas. There's government land available. Why bother yourself, with owning land in the capital of the country? Go far away. Go to the countryside and purchase land. These lush areas in St. Peter's and so forth, where you can have more property. You can build a big house. You can build a big block apartment and take care of your grandchildren, etc. And give up your property in Phillipsburg. And so when that happened, the identity of Phillipsburg began to change. Because back then, there was only Front Street and Back Street. We now have Pondville and Swaliga Road and Canigita Street. But back then, it was Pond, Back Street, Front Street, Great Bay, the beach. But so the interesting thing though, is that the political leaders who were told the people, go ahead and sell your land, it's okay. You'll get more land for, and live nice, enjoy yourself even more than living in town. They didn't sell their land. As a matter of fact, they even bought more land. And so when you look at Phillipsburg today, when you look at the capital of the country, you see something totally different from perhaps the ambitions, the wishes, or just the overall outlook of St. Martin back then, because the landowners changed. And so when we start to see the type of landscape, when we look at the what is allowed, the fact that, for example, as one politician said, Front Street being $1 billion street, do you own property in that $1 billion street? Do you have real estate in that $1 billion street? Can you really make a decision in the capital of your country on that $1 billion street? Why no? Yes, no? Why not if no? Because you don't have real estate. Because you don't own the land. And so who owns the land gets to set the course of the capital, gets to set the course of the nation. And that is the point. That is why it matters who owns St. Martin. It's only because we have weak leaders, and weak governments that, for example, you can have where a landowner, real estate, someone with real estate, can feel so comfortable, can be so brazen enough to open up a casino right next to a high school. But did your leaders care? Does it matter to them? No. Because the person, perhaps, whether it's a company, groups, etc., they may not be able to vote, but they have an interest, they have an investment in that property that they own, and they want to see returns, and they don't care about how that return comes, even to your detriment to the let's say the impact on our value, on our norms. Because owning land is not just limited to saying that I have property. So there's more to just saying I'm a St. Martiner. Where is your deed? Where is your real estate? because that matters. Land is the basis of wealth. Land is the basis from which, the future of a country is shaped. Right? Because this island, the only reason, that some of us carry Dutch passports, some of us carry French passports, is because two forces or nations decided to come here and claim this land as theirs, and they determine where that land can progress. They determine the outlook, the future of that land, ultimately. It's the same thing for you in your house. Your children can't come and tell you, can do whatever they want in your house. And we know what that's like, When our parents tell you, when for example, when your parents tell you, don't slam no door in who? In my house. Don't bring no strangers to my house. They get to set the rules because they are the owner. They have the deed. So it is extremely important that you now start to think about, how can I be a landowner? How can I also own St. Martin? How can I shape the future of this island? It's one thing to be an activist. It's one thing to maybe do what I do news and media. It's one thing to, contribute and give back. It's one thing to vote even, but it's another to own property. It makes a difference because land leads to legacy. And what is the legacy that we are creating? What is the story that we are telling a future generation about St. Martin? Because right now you have a case where lots of property is being bought and sold to developers, developers and persons, Americans, Canadians, or Europeans, who now recognize that this land has value, and they're not too concerned about, they are concerned about the future of this land, but they're concerned based on their investment and the return that they want, but not as far as education is concerned, really, not necessarily as far as the justice system is concerned or healthcare, only when it is connected to their personal benefit, right? Because, well, they do want good roads, they do want proper internet and good infrastructure. In case you got to go to the hospital, yes, in case you get sick and go to the hospital, yes, they want good healthcare and they want less crime, but it is because it serves their needs. And that's the reality of life. But your needs and your requirements, your values, your traditions are different. But we are starting to see a shift in the change of our story because the landowners are not just you and I. Therefore, for the final point, so that we can finally get to the answer, who owns St. Martin? While, in discussing what I shared, it's based on a macro level. So as far as land and real estate, where the whole island, the landscape itself, the territory St. Martin is concerned, geopolitically, who gets to determine the course of this island primarily is who has a claim to this nation where international law is concerned. And that is, guess what? The French and Dutch. We can't hide from it. We can't escape it. Because they made the claim that this nation is part of the king of the Dutch kingdom, the king's domain, under his dominion. This island can't veer off too far from the statute, right? We can't veer off too far from the principles and the values and the desires of the kingdom. We could do our own thing, but you definitely can't do it past beyond what the king, right, has intended for his dominion. So that's something to understand. In the same way with on the French side, it being part of the French Republic, they could do what they want to a degree, but it has to be in the confines of their laws, their rules. And so who gets to make those decisions impact the country is the landowner. Because it's not like a Jamaica, it's not like a Canada or United States where it's America for the Americans, Canada for the Canadians, Nigeria for the Nigerians, St. Martin for St. Martiners, and French and the Dutch and who else, right? It's a reality. It's a reality. We are part of a kingdom. We are not an independent territory. So we don't fully own the land. And, in another podcast, we're going to talk about independence because, that's one that in some ways, has become less taboo, but it's a topic worth discussing. Nonetheless, they get to make decisions as well that impact your life, because beyond the landowners that shape the internal affairs of the country, they get to shape the external factors, right? Foreign affairs, who we to extend who we can trade with, who we do business with, where do we get funding from internationally, and treaties, that we can sign, that we can be a party to, and so forth. There are different tiers, to land ownership. So remember, ownership of land, real estate, gives you a real say, gives you a real position, gives you real standing. Real estate, it is significant, it is powerful, and you need to own real estate. Therefore, when we look at St. Martin today, we see again so much development happening, so many developers who come in, invest, that has changed the story of St. Martin, because we see the destruction of our environment. And then we have where, for example, even lands that we can say is ours by means of it being government land or public land, look at who government gives it out to. From this present government and Minister of Romy to those in the past and island council members and so forth. Primarily, we know they give it out to their family and friends, but then they also give it to those who have the highest bid. The highest bid, because they have these great plans to extract, to develop, to exploit the land. And it's just a reality. That's the nature of economics and business and trade. But to what end? And is it in line with a future you have for the island? Because they have their future. And remember, they have their investment and they want a return. Even though they can't vote, they can still shape policies and decisions that are made because they have a stake in the land. And so the question is then, how can we change the narrative? How can we shift the story? Because will it continue to be that more and more developers will come and just buy up all the property that is purely rental property, investment properties? Where will you live? On the mountaintop? Because remember, we have a hillside policy, or we should have one, right? We should have one. So at least begin to understand it matters who you vote for. It matters who you put in positions of power. Because if you have an incompetent person, for example, as Minister of Romy, someone who doesn't have the qualifications and understanding of what it takes to shape a country and the value of infrastructure, of civil engineering and the like, then guess what? Your country will continue to be sold off, just changing the narrative, the history, the identity of your island. But then to what gain? Who benefits? Them, most likely. Their friends, most likely. Their political supporters, most likely. Their family, most likely. You, probably. Thus, I believe what we can do is to start changing the narrative, is to start stepping out by faith. I am well aware of the challenges that exist when it comes to owning real estate on St. Martin, because we have, there's a lot of scarcity and there's a lot of people. So you know what it means when there's a product that people want and it's scarce, it's limited, price goes all the way up. But there's still a difference there's still hope, right? There's still a difference that can be made. And so one, in stepping out in faith, faith requires work, right? Faith without works is dead. If you want to be a landowner, you want to have real estate in St. Martin, start finding out, well, do you qualify, for example, for a mortgage? And there's different ways to get land, but mortgage is the most traditional route. We do have succession land, and that's also another issue, because a lot of those lands are tied up in family battles, or the fact that they can't necessarily find, certain family members that everyone can sign to agree, the course, the future of that land. So even to those families that have such issues, you need to get your act together. It's a reality. Else this island's future is at stake, yes. But besides that, it matters that, you find out, well, what do you qualify for? And, what can you realistically get? You don't need a whole hill, right? You don't really need a whole hill. And it would be nice, but do you need it? In addition to that, so by shopping around, finding out, what properties are available on the market, start stepping out in faith, start looking at properties, contact the banks, contact real estate agents. But moving on from just there, another thing that would make a huge difference is in us building communities. So using the case of, for example, these two amazing friends, these two young ladies, along with your husbands. They've been the two young ladies. They were friends, from since childhood, from very young. St. Martin, born raised here in St. Martin, and this story actually came out last year, and they decided to buy property together, and that was so significant because in doing so, you now have the case where you have two persons who understand each other, who have the same values, who have the same beliefs. They're coming together to buy a property, to split it, that they can continue the legacy of not just their friendship, but of their nation. They can now contribute towards the future story of the island. And we now have to get to the point that understanding that the way in which we would have wanted to own land is not the same. Sometimes we can't just own one whole huge plot by ourselves. We may need to start sharing it because of scarcity and pricing and so forth. And you can say, well, maybe you're afraid to buy land with somebody because what if you fall out and what if things didn't work out? That is why you have contracts. People from other cultures do it. You mean to say you can't do it? Yes, you can. You certainly can, and you better. You could do it too. Why do you think where certain districts on the island you see an entire culture or group or ethnicity from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill? They own various plots of land, right? They make sure that they have a community. Because if we want for St. Martin to get back to the point that it's truly the friendly island, an island that is neighborly, an island that we can go back to jollifications and loving each other and sharing each other, looking after each other's kids and raising the child as a village, then we need to be together. We need to own real estate. If I want to only live up Monte Vista and you want land in Kipukoy, and so I'm up here, you all over there, why don't we just come together, buy land here, and share it and build and bring in other people? Because it matters who owns the land, because he who owns the land determines the future of that land. Do you want to be a decision maker in your country? So I mentioned these options, which there's far more to it. It helps. If you know someone who owns land, find out what did they do, how was their process going through with the bank. How can I buy land together with a friend, with family members? How can I clear up succession land issues? Because what we have is boundaries that are placed all over the place. But it's now time for us to lock hands together, to build that community, to build that St. Martin that our children can be proud of, to leave a legacy behind, something that they can literally build from, right? And then continue the process, because it matters who owns the land. So if you've been listening attentively, you probably already figured out the answer. Who owns St. Martin? Let me tell you who owns St. Martin. You want to know who owns St. Martin? Whoever owns the deed. That's who owns St. Martin. Whoever owns the deed. Do you have a deed? If not, start working on it. Thank you very much. So, with that, I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I had a great time. I hope you did too. And I hope that the information, the perspective was one that was impactful, that you can connect with. And yeah, for those of you who know me, man, I speak from the heart. I love this island, I love this country, and we need real change. But change comes in many different ways. So we got to look at things from different angles. And I also want to say, before I sign off, for those of you who want to invest in digital real estate, so that being this podcast, for example, then feel free to contact me. The information is right below, where you can email me if you want to sponsor, if you want to advertise and contribute towards the growth, the development of this prime real estate. And I'm not boasting, I'm telling you the truth. It's going to take off, and it's going very far. And you have that opportunity to start investing, to start placing your stake right here from now. So take full advantage of it. Trust me, because in time, probably wish you bought in quite earlier. So I'd like to thank you. God bless you. Be sure to tune in for the next time, and take care.